Hey everyone, welcome back to Yuri's Box. In today's video, I'm going to talk about Bitcoin. If you like this kind of content, consider leaving a like. And as usual, nothing in this video is financial advice. So really, I'm going to touch on something I already talked about in a video I made earlier today, which is Bitcoin. And something that, I'll go over briefly what I mentioned in the video today. And that is the idea that Bitcoin still hasn't really correlated with the stock sell-off. So the idea is, yesterday we saw a huge, yesterday and the day before we had a lot of selling pressure on stocks, given the Trump tariff announcements. At the same time, Bitcoin has continued to go sideways. Now, in the video I made earlier, I quickly pointed out how this isn't necessarily unusual, and it's not even the first time that we see something like this. For instance, this reminded me really of something I lived through when I was starting out back in 2022. And that is really the beginning of January up until the end of Q1, more or less. And I pointed out how from the beginning of January, from the low to the high of March 28th, or the week of March 28th, we had about a 20% rally on Bitcoin. Now, again, there was volatility during that time, of course. But at the same time, if you look at what the S&P was doing and really what happened in that time frame on the S&P, what you'll see, if I can get the chart right, there we go. From the week of January 3rd, right here, from the peak to the week of March 28th, which is really the top right here, stocks were down 4%, all right, on the same time frame. So again, I wouldn't be too optimistic just yet on Bitcoin. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that Bitcoin is going to crash and burn immediately. I mean, it's the weekend, and usually Bitcoin tends to have violent moves on the weekend. So keep an eye out for that. But again, I wouldn't wave my flag in victory just yet, because Bitcoin throughout history, and I just pointed one example out, has the habit of showing strength until it doesn't. All right. You think it's holding up, and then all of a sudden it just switches off, and it follows what the overall trend is. Now, again, I have nothing against Bitcoin. I'm, on the contrary, quite sympathetic to the Bitcoin story. I don't hold any Bitcoin currently, but again, I'm merely pointing out the fact that I would be cautious with the optimism, given the fact that we are still in the midst of the tariff drama. We still haven't received any updates. We might get something tomorrow on Sunday as we move closer to futures opening. But for the time being, I would maintain my cautious outlook. And I would reiterate two scenarios that I've spoken about in my previous videos, which are really two possibilities for where the market might be headed. And the first I've talked about this many times before, is something like 2017. And again, I've said it before, if you don't follow Benjamin Cowen, make sure you follow him. He's the best at, crypto in general, especially Bitcoin. But again, I think we're faced with two possibilities. We're either in, a buying opportunity, and this is just, it'll be over soon. And honestly, in a situation like that, you wouldn't even have to be too worried about a potential drop in Bitcoin, because like in 2017, we saw 40% drops. Not once, not twice. And if I'm not mistaken, right here's the this one was a 30% drop, but you get the picture. This isn't anything new, when you're looking at Bitcoin. I mean, this is what you're signing up for. You're signing up for volatility. The other possibility is something more similar that we're living through, something that is quite similar to 2019. And I'll go over that quick. I'll go over 2019 very quickly. So the idea is we have the bear market and we have the initial low. We rally off of the initial low by about 350%. All right. Fast forward to today. We put in the low after the bear market, right here in November of 2022 with the collapse of FTX, and after that we rally about. It's not exactly the same, but again a 375 rally more or less. Now, is it exactly the same? No, but the magnitude is at the very least similar. In 2019, what we had is basically a downward movement in price. We had price move downwards for quite a bit of time. In 2024, we had something very similar occur. We had price move downwards in over, really, this was a 6 to 8 month period. After that, we had what you would call a breakout, all right? Right here. From the low to this local high was about a 60 to 65% rally. This time we had a move from the low that was roughly double what we saw in 2019. Now, this is where it gets kind of tricky, and you really have to practice a good deal of dubious speculation, as the great Benjamin Cowen would say. And you would have to say, well, why was this just a 70%, 60% rally? Well, what happened here in February is we actually started getting the COVID fears take place in the market. So you could easily argue that perhaps this move would have continued hadn't the COVID fears taken hold of the markets starting in February. In 2019, what followed this local top was a drop of about, again, to 60 to 65%. Now, I'm not arguing necessarily for something like that. I'm just pointing these two scenarios out, mainly because personally, I still haven't really decided on on the direction of Bitcoin, given the fact that we're living in such times where things can change with a blink of an eye. And as I say, it's not about the technicals; it's about, sadly, economic events and policy. I can squiggle as much as I want on the chart, but that won't change the destiny of Bitcoin. Bitcoin can easily go up to 130K. And that wouldn't surprise me the least. No matter how hard I squiggle on a chart, I want to remind you of that. However, I just can't shake off, if I'm being completely honest, the similarities with 2019, given also the fact that we are facing something that, yes, might be over with next week, Trump can go on Trump's on Truth Social tomorrow morning, tweet something, and everything's back to normal. The Nasdaq will go flying again. But what if it doesn't? What if everybody, political actors, meaning prime ministers and so on and so forth, drag their feet on tariffs? What if perhaps you have a time of continued escalation, where instead of everybody just, coming to terms immediately, perhaps this thing kind of gets dragged out a bit, say even by a month and a half, something like that. Could that be enough to cause enough damage to, propel us to a new local low like 2019? I don't know, but I'm just pointing this out. Again, I can't shake it off. I keep looking at 2019. Also, given the fact that what caused, arguably, going back to 2019 a minute. And again, this is dubious speculation at best, just quoting the great Benjamin Cowan. But this local top may as well got interrupted by the COVID fears. This move here could very well have been interrupted by immediate policy shift by the Federal Reserve, because when we got this flash crash right here, that was met with zero interest rates and QE immediately. What is different this time is that we still have what I call inflation PTSD, meaning the bias in markets, and frankly, even in the Federal Reserve, is towards fighting inflation. Still at this point, I spoke about this in today's video. Powell is still looking for things that can exacerbate inflation. All right. So what that entails, really, the consequence of that is that potentially the Fed will cut only when they see something bad happening, which means they'll be late. So potentially we are in somewhat worse position. Again, this is all banking on the fact that if this tariff drama gets stretched out, which is a big if, remember. But if it does get stretched out, and we are waiting for something bad to occur before we have an easy monetary policy, just like we saw this move be greater in magnitude compared to 2019, could the next move down from the local top be even greater in magnitude when if something bad were to occur in the near future? So instead of being a 60% drop, could it be something like a 70 or an 80% drop? Given the fact that if we get to interest rate cuts, it is likely because something negative occurred. And again, if you're waiting for something negative to occur, you're likely going to be late. And so you're no longer going to have that immediate response that you had in 2019. I think I'll leave you to be the judge of the direction of Bitcoin. I honestly haven't I don't really have an opinion about Bitcoin at this point. Obviously, on the long term, I'm bullish Bitcoin because, again, I appreciate its qualities, and I think it does have a lot going for it. But as far as the short term is the short term outlook is concerned, I still can't shake off the similarity in that I find with 2019. Does that mean that it's going to occur? Absolutely not. But again, I think it's something worth thinking about, honestly. Given the fact that, again, we do currently, at the release, have a catalyst. Like we had in February of 2020. Right now, the catalyst is this, looming tariff drama. Whether this is just a buying opportunity or it's something akin to what we saw in 2022, where Bitcoin initially holds up well, but just ends up following the rest of risk assets, and eventually, follows the 2019 pattern. It will really depend on what will happen with the tariff drama. I'll leave it at that. You can make your own. Your own mind up, and again, I'm just pointing this out. Don't blame the don't blame the messenger. And I'll be following Bitcoin closely to see how things evolve. If you like this kind of content, consider leaving a like. And as usual, nothing in this video is financial advice. I'll see you next time. Bye.